He walked into our H. Within months, I was a stranger in my own life, silent, bruised. My mom said he was just being tough. Years later, he applied to rent an apartment, my apartment. Stay with me. Because this isn't just a story of revenge, **************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************I was 10 when everything changed. It wasn't like a switch flipped, or a storm blew in with warning. It was quieter than that. It came in the form of a man with a heavy duffel bag and shoes that tracked mud onto the carpet my mother used to obsessively vacuum. He walked into our lives on a rainy Thursday afternoon, no suitcase, no introduction. Just a half-smile and the smell of smoke. I had been building a Lego castle in the living room. My mom was in the kitchen, humming something soft. And then the door opened, and he walked in like he belonged. She didn't explain who he was. She didn't ask me to say hello. She just said, "Be polite," and went back to the stove. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the first of many things I'd have to swallow. He took the couch like it was his. He grabbed the remote, flipped through channels, turned the volume up loud. He opened the fridge, cracked a beer before dinner, and left the cap on the counter. That first night, he sat in Dad's old chair. The recliner Mom swore she'd never let anyone else touch. And when I looked at her for permission to be confused, to ask questions, she just smiled too quickly and asked if I'd washed my hands for dinner. He didn't look at me that night. Not really. But I felt seen. The kind of seen that makes your skin crawl. Like you've been categorized, judged, and filed away as something small, something weaker. He spoke in short, clipped sentences. His voice rough. He chewed loudly. Scraped his knife across his plate with the kind of carelessness that made every sound feel like a warning. That night I brushed my teeth without being asked, and I went to bed early. I stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the way his laugh didn't match the tone of what was being said on the TV. At first, it was little things. He'd leave the bathroom door locked even when no one else was home. He'd stand too close in the hallway. He'd say things to Mom that made her laugh, but not with her eyes. I once caught him looking through my backpack. He said he was just checking my homework. There wasn't even a sheet of paper in his hands. A week passed. Then 2. Then a month. By then, his toothbrush sat next to mine. His shoes blocked the front door. And Mom had stopped cooking the things I liked. Instead, it was chili. He liked chili. Heavy, greasy, spicy chili that made my stomach turn. She'd ask me what I thought, but her eyes warned me not to say the wrong thing. I tried to tell her once. I said I didn't like him. I said I didn't feel safe. She paused, just long enough to make me hope, and then she laughed. "Sweetheart, he's just trying to help. He wants you to be strong." I was 10. I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe strength felt like fear, like discomfort, like swallowing your voice. But deep down, I already knew. No one had to tell me. He wasn't here to make me stronger. He was here to see what he could get away with. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. He threw away my drawing, one I had worked on for a school project. I asked him why. He said, "Didn't look like anything worth keeping." When I told Mom, she said maybe it was an accident. When I cried, she said maybe I was too sensitive. After that, I stopped showing her what I made. And slowly, I stopped making things altogether. There was a day he yelled at me. Not loud enough for the neighbors. Just enough for me. Enough to press his face close to mine, his hand gripping my arm too tightly, his breath hot with beer and disdain. He said I needed to man up. He said if I ever snitched on him again, I'd regret it. I believed him. That night, I lay in bed with my heart hammering in my chest. The house was quiet, but I knew he was still awake. I knew because I could hear him walking. Slowly. Purposefully. Up and down the hallway. I started sleeping with the light on. I kept my door wedged shut with a chair. School became my only refuge. But even there, I changed. I used to be talkative. Curious. Now, I sat in the back, quiet, avoiding eye contact. When teachers asked questions, I shrugged. A counselor pulled me aside once. She said she noticed I was different. I wanted to tell her everything. But then I thought of my mother. And how she told me not to exaggerate. How she'd said, "Don't embarrass me like that again." So I smiled, and I said I was just tired. He moved in completely after 2 months. Officially. His name on the bills. His mail in our mailbox. I remember the moment I saw his name on the electric bill. It felt like concrete. Like he wasn't going anywhere. He used to brag about being a real man. Said boys like me needed to learn how to take a punch. I never actually told anyone how many punches I took. Not physically, always. But punches come in other forms. Like the ones that hit you when your mom sets another plate at the table, for him. When she laughs at his jokes, even the ones at your expense. When she pretends she doesn't hear the things he says when she's out of the room. Once, I came home with a bruised cheek. He said I fell. I said nothing. Mom didn't even look up from her phone. People like to say children are resilient. That's true, to an extent. But what they really mean is that we get really good at pretending we're okay. We learn how to shrink ourselves down, so we don't make the wrong kind of noise. By the time I turned 11, I didn't cry anymore. Didn't complain. Didn't ask for anything. I woke up. Went to school. Came home. Ate dinner. Went to bed. Repeat. The goal was simple: survive without being noticed. I had a hiding place. It was the small crawlspace behind my closet. I lined it with blankets. A flashlight. A stash of crackers. A book I'd read 6 times. It became my world. My real room. The only place where I didn't flinch at footsteps. I'd sit there, breathing slow, listening to the sound of them laughing on the couch, watching TV. I imagined what life would be like if I were someone else. Somewhere else. But then the laughter would stop. And the walking would start again. And I'd hold my breath. There were moments, just moments, when I saw a flicker of who my mom used to be. She'd brush my hair from my forehead when I was sick. She'd hum old songs when doing laundry. She'd ask me if I needed lunch money. But it was like watching someone through glass. Close, but unreachable. The last real thing I said to her was, "I miss how things used to be." She looked at me for a long time. Then said, "Don't start. You're too old for whining." That's when I knew. I wasn't just losing my childhood. I was losing her. So I did what all wounded kids do. I stopped reaching out. I stopped asking to be saved. I stopped believing I deserved to be. Instead, I watched. Listened. Waited. Because I didn't have strength yet. But I had memory. And I was learning something important. The world may not be fair, but it keeps receipts. It wasn't just what he did. It was how she explained it away. That's the part that really broke me. Because when the people who are supposed to protect you redefine abuse as love, you start to wonder if your bruises mean you were hugged too hard. He started calling me names. Not all at once. Not in a shouting match kind of way. But in passing. He'd call me soft when I couldn't lift something. Girl if I flinched too easily. Stupid if I didn't answer fast enough. Dead weight if I dropped anything. And every time, I'd glance at my mom, just to see if she heard it too. She always did. But all she'd do was shake her head slightly. Like she was embarrassed for me, not by him. There was this one night I'll never forget. He wanted me to carry a case of beer from the car. It was heavy. Slippery. My hands were wet from doing dishes. I dropped it. 2 bottles shattered on the driveway. I froze. He didn't yell. He stepped closer. Knelt beside me. Spoke soft, too soft. "You know what's wrong with you," he whispered. "You think the world owes you something. But it doesn't. You owe it pain. Same as I paid." I didn't understand those words. But the look in his eyes? I understood that perfectly. And then he stood up, slapped the back of my head, not hard, not enough to leave a mark, and told me to go inside and act like a man. I told Mom what he said. I told her he hit me. I told her it scared me. She didn't even pause. "He's just trying to toughen you up. That's how real men are." That night, I stared at myself in the mirror. I pressed 2 fingers to the back of my skull, where his palm had landed. And I tried to imagine what a real man would do. Would he cry? Would he shout? Would he hit back? Or would he stand there, like me, frozen in confusion, hoping for someone to say, "I believe you"? But no one ever said that. Not my teacher, when I stopped turning in assignments. Not the counselor, when I refused to speak. Not my aunt, who visited once and said I looked different. Everyone saw the signs. But no one wanted to be the one who said, "Maybe something's wrong here." He once threw my dinner plate across the room. Because I forgot to set the table for him first. It shattered against the wall. The food splattered. I didn't cry. I stood there, fork still in hand, heart beating so fast I thought I might pass out. He walked away like it was nothing. And my mother. She looked at me and said, "Next time, remember. He works hard. He deserves respect." Respect. That word echoed inside me. Was I supposed to respect someone who made me afraid to enter a room? Who moved like thunder and glared like lightning? Was I supposed to thank the man who erased my drawings, broke my trust, and silenced my voice? Apparently, yes. Because, he's just trying to help you grow. Eventually, I stopped telling anyone what was happening. Not because I didn't want help. But because I realized it made no difference. If I cried, I was weak. If I fought back, I was disrespectful. If I stayed quiet, I was finally learning. There was no right answer. So I stopped asking questions. He got bolder. Started waking me up at dawn to do chores. Made me clean the bathroom with a toothbrush, because that's how discipline is built. Took the door off my bedroom, because privacy is a reward, not a right. My mom said it was good for me. That I needed structure. That he was saving me from myself. I began to feel like a prisoner in my own body. I tiptoed around the house like a ghost. Flinched at sudden noises. Jumped when someone said my name too loudly. I developed tics, small ones, blinking too fast, clearing my throat. Nervous energy that had nowhere to go. And worst of all, I started to believe it was normal. He hit me once. Open palm. Right across the face. Left a handprint. Mom saw it. She said, "Well, you must have done something. He wouldn't just do that." That's when something broke inside me, not the kind of break that makes you shatter. The kind that makes you harden. I stopped waiting for love. Stopped hoping for justice. And I began building something else, a quiet kind of rage. It lived under the surface. I'd stare at the ceiling at night, imagining I could fly through it, disappear. I'd draw pictures in my head of houses without locks, without shouting, without fear. And every time he cursed, or mocked, or shoved me, I added another brick to the imaginary walls I was building inside. Walls that would someday become something real. He liked to talk about how poor he was growing up. How nobody helped him. How the world owed him something now. My mom nodded, like she understood. Like that gave him permission to break everything in his path. I remember wondering if being broken gave people permission to break others. And then I promised myself something. If I ever got out, I wouldn't become him. I'd become his opposite. And I'd build something he could never take. I began to study him, not fearfully, but analytically. I watched how he lied. How he twisted conversations. How he manipulated sympathy. And I learned. Not to use it. But to protect myself from it. There was one day, I saw him crying. It was late. I had gotten up to use the bathroom. He didn't see me. He was sitting on the couch, sobbing quietly. Drunk. He mumbled something about a brother. About being left behind. And for a second, a tiny second, I felt sorry for him. But then he saw me. And the switch flipped. Go back to bed, he snapped, venom in his voice. That's when I realized. Even his weakness had claws. I learned to move silently. To read body language. To listen to the tone behind the words. I became hyper-aware of everything. Because when home is a battlefield, awareness is armor. I found a notebook once. He kept it in a drawer. Inside were calculations, finances, debts, budgets. He owed a lot of people money. He was behind on taxes. I didn't fully understand it at the time, but I knew one thing. People like him don't last forever. And when they fall hard. That became my hope. Not that I'd hit him back. Not that I'd scream or get even. But that someday, somewhere, I'd be free. And he wouldn't even see it coming. My mom kept getting colder. She stopped hugging me. Stopped asking about school. Stopped saying goodnight. All her warmth went to him. And I began to wonder if I had ever truly known her. I spent one summer building things in secret. I taught myself about credit scores. Watched YouTube videos on home ownership, legal rights, eviction law. I didn't know why, I just knew it made me feel stronger. I even wrote a list. Don't become like him. Don't trust apologies without change. Build something that can't be taken. Years would pass before I understood what I was really doing. But even then, I had already planted the seed. That one day, I'd own something he needed. And he'd have to come to me. There comes a moment when fear stops feeling like fear. It becomes routine. It becomes a schedule, a ritual. Where every creak in the hallway means something. Every cough through the wall is a code. Every silence between screams feels louder than the noise. That was my life, from age 11 to 13. And in those years, I learned how to survive by pretending I was never there. I became a shadow. I timed my bathroom trips to when they were asleep. I memorized floorboards, where they creaked, where they didn't. I learned how to breathe without being heard. He'd walk past my room at night. Sometimes he'd stop. Sometimes the door would jiggle, just enough to make me sweat. I slept with one eye open, literally. Because I didn't trust that door. Didn't trust those footsteps. Didn't trust her silence. There was one night I remember too vividly. I had locked the door with a chair, wedged it tight. At 2:17 a.m., I heard the handle twist. Then push. Then more push. The wood groaned. My heart pounded. And then, nothing. He walked away. I didn't sleep at all after that. I just stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling. The same ones Mom put there when I was 6. They meant safety once. Now they were just stickers, stuck above a boy who no longer existed. At school, I stopped existing too. I sat in the corner. Avoided recess. Spoke when spoken to. My grades dropped. My energy vanished. The teachers said I wasn't applying myself. The counselor asked if I was being bullied. I nodded. But I didn't say who. Because how do you explain that the monster is in your home? And wears slippers? And eats your mother's cooking? I wrote things in notebooks I never let anyone see. Little notes to myself. Stay invisible. Don't provoke him. Don't trust silence. I drew diagrams of my room. Escape routes. I even marked where I could hide if things got worse. No child should ever have to learn the layout of fear. Once, I forgot to take the trash out. He grabbed me by the collar and slammed the bin against the wall. Mom wasn't home. When she returned, she saw the dent in the drywall. He said I'd tripped. I said nothing. She looked at both of us. Then walked to her room without a word. That silence was louder than the bang had been. The weekends were the worst. He didn't work then. Which meant he was always around. Boredom made him crueler. He'd find reasons to yell. Sometimes, I think he didn't even need reasons. He started keeping the thermostat cold. Said, cold toughens people up. I'd sleep under 2 blankets, shivering, listening to him snore from the other room. I wanted to hate him. But I didn't have the energy. Hate requires fire. I had nothing left but ash. The worst part was my mother. Not what she did. But what she didn't do. She didn't protect. Didn't ask questions. Didn't stop him. Sometimes I thought she couldn't. Other times. I knew she just didn't want to. She'd rather believe I was too sensitive than admit she brought a monster into our home. There were nights I heard them laughing in the living room. Like everything was normal. He'd tell a joke. She'd laugh too hard. And I'd sit in my room, the walls pressing in, wondering if maybe I was the joke. I tried to run away once. Packed a backpack with granola bars, some cash, a flashlight. Made it 5 blocks before I panicked. Where would I go? Who would believe me? What if they brought me back? I returned before sunrise. No one noticed I'd even left. That realization hurt more than any hit ever did. There was a boy at school named Micah. He asked why I wore the same hoodie every day. I told him it was my favorite. It wasn't. It was the only one that still fit. Micah once shared his lunch with me when I forgot mine. He smiled like it was nothing. I almost cried in the bathroom afterward. Because kindness felt foreign. Like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. One day, I missed the bus. I knew what that meant. I'd have to walk home. Alone. Late. And he'd be mad. When I got home, dinner was cold. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and said, "You think you can disrespect this house?" Then he shoved the plate of food off the counter. It hit the floor. Spaghetti and ceramic everywhere. I bent down to clean it. He didn't help. Mom didn't come out of the bedroom. I bled from a shard of the broken plate. He told me to stop whining. I began to feel like I was watching my life happen from outside my own body. Like I wasn't in it anymore. I couldn't laugh. Couldn't cry. Just observed. Trauma will do that. It splits you. Turns you into an audience of one, watching yourself survive. There was a substitute teacher one day who asked us to write an essay about our hero. I wrote about the janitor. He never said much. But he always gave me a nod when I passed. And he once helped me pick up my books when I dropped them. I turned it in. The teacher called me up afterward. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded. I wasn't. He got a job at a construction site. Worked long hours. Came home angry. He started drinking more. The arguments got louder. One night, I heard them through the wall. Something broke, glass or a dish. I pressed my ear to the wall. Her voice said, "You're scaring him." His voice said, "Good." That night, I didn't sleep at all. I wanted to run again. This time, farther. But I needed a plan. I needed money. An address. A chance. And none of those things existed for a 13-year-old boy. I started collecting cans. Doing odd jobs for neighbors who didn't ask questions. Mowing lawns. Walking dogs. Anything to get out of the house and earn cash. I hid it behind a loose floorboard under my bed. It wasn't much. But it was something. My escape fund. The day I turned 14, no one said anything. No card. No cake. No acknowledgement. I went to school. Came home. Ate leftovers. That night, I wrote in my notebook. I don't have a birthday. I have survival anniversaries. He started falling behind on rent. They fought more. She started looking tired. Her makeup thicker. Her eyes duller. But still, she defended him. He's just going through a rough time. So was I. But no one defended me. I got good at lying. I'm fine. Just tired. Had a late night. It became second nature. My real life, my fear, my bruises, my silent screams, never made it past the front porch. And then one day, he hit her. I didn't see it. I heard it. The slap. The cry. The silence. I froze in my room. Waited. Listened. And then, the television came back on. Like nothing happened. That was the moment I stopped loving her. Not because she got hit. But because she still stayed. I realized something then. He wasn't the only villain in the house. She was too. Because apathy is just a quieter form of cruelty. I doubled my efforts. More jobs. More savings. More research. I went to the library. Read books on emancipation. Watched videos on rental law. I didn't understand all of it. But I didn't stop. Because I knew. Someday, I'd leave. And I'd never, ever. Come back. I didn't plan it that night. I'd thought about it, of course. Drawn maps. Packed fake bags. Rehearsed it in my head. But when it actually happened, it wasn't a plan. It was survival. The day had started normally. He was in a worse mood than usual. Storms delayed his work shift, so he came home early, drunk and irritated. I was in the kitchen when he walked in, soggy boots tracking mud across the tiles. I didn't say anything. Just wiped it up quietly. He stared at me for a second too long. I held my breath. And then he walked past. But something changed that evening. It wasn't what he did. It was what she didn't. We were at dinner. Leftovers again. Cold spaghetti. No conversation. He looked at me and asked why I hadn't cut the grass that day. I explained, gently, that it had rained. The mower couldn't grip the wet yard. His eyes narrowed. He stood. Pushed his chair back. Walked toward me. And for the first time in 2 years, I stood up too. Not out of defiance. Not out of courage. Out of instinct. He raised his hand. I flinched. And my mother. She said, "Just sit down, both of you." Her voice didn't shake. She didn't even look up. That's when I knew, she was gone. Whatever piece of her had once loved me had dissolved completely. After dinner, I went to my room. Closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed. And I looked around. At the peeling posters. The broken lamp. The dented wall from 2 years ago that never got patched. And I realized, this room wasn't mine. This house wasn't home. These people weren't my family. They were captors. So I got up. Opened the closet. Pulled out my backup plan. A second-hand duffel bag with $84 in cash. 3 granola bars. A hoodie. A roll of socks. And my notebook, the one with all my plans. I didn't even cry. Not yet. I waited until I heard him snoring from the living room recliner. Waited longer for the TV to turn off. Waited even longer for the hallway to go still. At 12:41 a.m., I opened the window. The screen was already loose. I had worked on it for months without anyone noticing. I climbed out slowly. My foot hit the dirt. I stood there for a full minute, breathing in the cold night air, wondering if this was the moment I'd regret forever. And then I ran. I didn't run fast. I didn't even know where I was going. I just moved, block by block, street by street, until the streetlights faded and the world felt quiet. I didn't look back. Because if I did, I might not keep going. By 2 a.m., I was sitting on the steps of a church downtown. Everything was quiet. The night hummed with the sound of air vents and distant traffic. I took out a granola bar. Ate half. Saved the rest. I didn't have a plan. Just space. And for the first time in years, the silence wasn't dangerous. It was sacred. I stayed there until dawn. The church doors opened at 6:12 a.m. A janitor came out, looked at me once, and said, "You all right, kid?" I nodded. He didn't press. He handed me a cup of water. Said nothing else. It was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in a long time. That first day was a blur. I walked aimlessly. Slept in a bus stop. Watched people pass with coffee and briefcases and headphones in. No one looked at me. And for once, that was a good thing. By nightfall, I was hungry. So I did something I never thought I would. I went into a convenience store, and stole. Not money. Just a sandwich. I felt like a criminal. But I also felt something else. Free. Because even in that desperate act, I was choosing for myself. Not obeying. Not surviving. Just acting. On the third day, I found a shelter. It was noisy, crowded, and smelled like bleach and old socks. But it was warm. They gave me a cot. A peanut butter sandwich. And a toothbrush in a Ziploc bag. I said thank you 3 times. They looked confused by my manners. There was a woman there named Grace. She was one of the volunteers. She had short curly hair and freckles like falling stars. She didn't ask too many questions. Just handed me a journal and said, "Sometimes it helps to write." She had no idea. I'd already written volumes in my head. For the next 3 months, that shelter became my home. I helped sweep floors. Unloaded supplies. Did whatever I could to stay out of trouble. Grace noticed. She pulled me aside one night and said, "You're different. You're not running. You're building." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever said something like that to me. She helped me apply for a youth outreach program. Gave me contacts. Helped me sign up for school again. It was hard. I felt behind. I felt broken. But I kept showing up. I started working part-time at a local diner. Washing dishes. Taking out trash. The owner, Mr. Glenn, was gruff, but fair. He said, "You show up, you work hard, I don't care where you came from." For the first time, I had value that wasn't tied to fear. At night, I'd still get nightmares. I'd jolt awake, sweaty, heart pounding, convinced I was back in that house. Sometimes I slept in corners. Sometimes I lined my shoes at the door, just in case. That trauma doesn't vanish. But slowly, I learned how to carry it without it swallowing me. I got my GED. Applied to community college. Started studying real estate. Why? Because it made sense. Because it was about land. And ownership. And power. Because it was about having a key to your own door. At 19, I bought my first duplex. A rundown place in a forgotten part of town. It took every cent I had saved. Every favor I was owed. Every ounce of determination. But I signed the papers. And when I held those keys, I cried. Not because I was proud. But because I remembered the boy who once lined his shoes at the door in case he had to run again. And now, he owned the door. I kept building. More properties. More tenants. I screened applicants carefully. I never rented to anyone who reminded me of him. And then one day, it happened. I got a rental application from an agency that worked with struggling tenants. The name was hers. My mother. She didn't recognize my name. I had changed it years ago. Legally. A clean break. But I recognized hers. And the address on the application? It listed her boyfriend as a co-tenant. I stared at that piece of paper for hours. My hands shook. My heart didn't know what to feel. Was this justice? Was this fate? I didn't know. But I accepted the application. Approved the lease. And waited. People think revenge is loud. They think it's fireworks and fury. But the real kind, the kind that grows inside a child left behind, it's quiet. Like water dripping on stone. I never told anyone where I went the night I ran. Never filed a report. Never looked back. And neither did they. I used to think I wanted closure. Some dramatic apology. A tearful reunion. A moment where my mother finally said, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you." But years passed. Silence stayed. And in that silence, I learned to build. It started small. I rented a room from a man named Terrence. He didn't ask questions. Just handed me a house key and said, "Don't break stuff." I worked nights at a diner, weekends at a recycling plant. Saved everything I earned. $8 ramen. Drank water. Skipped movies, birthdays, holidays. While other kids my age were partying or posting selfies. I was patching drywall and watching DIY Landlord YouTube videos at 3 a.m. At 19, I had scraped together $11,000. Most people laughed when I told them I wanted to buy property. You? A landlord? Credit score like that? Try again in 10 years. But rejection had stopped wounding me a long time ago. I found a duplex in foreclosure. It smelled like mildew and hopelessness. The foundation was cracked. But it had something I hadn't had in years, potential. The seller didn't believe I could close. The loan officer said my file was thin. But Grace, my case manager from the shelter, co-signed for me. Didn't ask for anything in return. "I just want to see you win," she said. Her words stayed with me every time I swung a hammer or bled over splinters. I slept in one unit while I fixed the other. Lived among sawdust and leaky pipes. Ate canned beans with a flashlight on the floor. And every day, I'd whisper to the empty rooms. This is mine now. Not his. Not hers. Mine. It took months, but I rented the second unit. The day that first check hit my account, I didn't celebrate. I just stared at the number. And cried. Not because I was rich. I wasn't. But because I had turned pain into rent. Grief into equity. Trauma into walls that kept other people safe. The next few years were relentless. I reinvested everything. Lived on less than minimum wage. Took online real estate courses. Learned about eviction law, lease agreements, property taxes. I was becoming the thing that once terrified me, a person with control. But I wasn't like him. I didn't control with fear. I built with intention. Every unit I rented was clean, fair, safe. I treated my tenants like people. Because I knew what it meant to be treated like less. People started calling me the quiet landlord. I didn't show up in person much. Didn't want my face tied to my name. Didn't need recognition. Just results. Brick by brick, unit by unit, my portfolio grew. By 24, I owned 6 properties. By 25, I had 12. Still lived modestly. Still cooked my own meals. Still double-locked my doors at night. The trauma didn't disappear. It never does. But it became part of the architecture. Like old scars under fresh paint. Invisible, but still there if you know where to look. Every now and then, I'd check on her. Google searches. Public records. A neighbor's tagged photo on social media. She was still with him. Still in his shadow. There were police reports, minor ones. Disturbances. Noise complaints. They moved around a lot. No stability. No homeownership. I remember thinking. So she never got out either. But the truth is, she never tried. I had changed my name legally by then. Started using my middle name. Dropped the last one. My identity became clean, sharp, forgettable. No baggage. So when their application showed up on my desk, they had no way of knowing it was me. Just another tenant looking for a second chance. Just another landlord deciding if they were worth it. The property was one of my newer ones, recently flipped. 1 bedroom. Simple layout. Affordable, clean, walking distance to a bus line. Their application came through an assistance program I supported, one designed for low-income families with limited rental history. The kind of program Grace used to run. Funny how things circle back. Her name jumped off the page first. Not the boyfriend's. Hers. My mother. I sat there staring at it. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Just a quiet hum behind my eyes. A familiar ache. And then I saw his name. The man who destroyed me. Who redefined my childhood as something to be survived. They wanted a home. I had one. And I approved it. Of course I did. Because for the first time in my life, they needed me. They didn't know it yet. But soon they would. I remember walking into that unit one last time before they arrived. I touched the walls. Ran my fingers along the clean counters. Looked out the window at the quiet street. And I whispered. Let's see if you like living with ghosts. Because I wouldn't yell. Wouldn't threaten. Wouldn't raise a fist. No. My revenge would come on a clipboard. A lease. A clause. And a name they didn't recognize, until it was too late. There are moments in life when the universe goes completely silent. When everything around you stills, not because there's peace, but because something irreversible is about to happen. That's what it felt like, watching them step out of the car. I was parked across the street, hidden behind the tinted window of a maintenance van. They didn't see me. But I saw everything. She stepped out first. Older now. Thinner. Her hair a duller version of what it once was. She wore the kind of second-hand coat you only find in charity bins. And behind her, lumbering like a shadow from my past, came him. His stride hadn't changed. Still wide. Arrogant. Heavy. He had a limp now, subtle, but noticeable. A consequence, maybe, of the life he lived. Or the people he stepped on. He looked at the building the way he looked at everything he thought he owned, like it should already be grateful for his presence. They stood at the door, holding a plastic bag and a backpack between them. No moving truck. No furniture. Just two bodies and the weight of everything they lost. The leasing agent, my leasing agent, greeted them. I watched her smile politely. Hand them keys. Walk them through the process. She didn't know who they were to me. No one on my team did. That's how I wanted it. This wasn't about showmanship. It was about control. He joked about the hall light being dim. She nodded, looked around nervously. And then, they smiled. Like the world was finally giving them a break. Like maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. That's when I felt it. The question I never thought I'd ask myself. Was I really going to go through with this? Because watching them walk into that apartment, the one I owned, the one I built, something strange happened. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt hollow. I had imagined this moment for years. Dreamed of it. Built my empire around it. But now that they were here, trapped inside my carefully constructed kingdom, I didn't know what justice looked like anymore. Did it look like eviction? Did it look like humiliation? Did it look like her finally realizing the name on the lease was her son's? They didn't recognize it, of course. I had scrubbed every part of myself from public records. Changed my name. Formed shell LLCs to hold my properties. Used intermediaries for tenant communication. I had become invisible, just like I had learned to be as a boy. Only this time, I was invisible on purpose. Later that night, I walked into the building. Keys in my pocket. Hoodie on. Head down. Just another landlord checking on another unit. They didn't see me. But I heard them. He was complaining about the kitchen sink. Said it was cheap. Said the cabinets weren't flush. She was unpacking silently. I watched through the crack of the barely closed door. He took off his coat, tossed it on the floor. Kicked the heater with the same aggression I remembered. I waited, listened, breathed. And then I walked away. I spent the next few days reviewing their lease. Every clause. Every fine print violation. It wasn't hard to find one. He had already violated noise restrictions twice. A neighbor logged a complaint about yelling. Another reported a strange odor, possibly marijuana, which was a violation in that unit's lease agreement. But I didn't act yet. I waited. Because this wasn't about pouncing. This was about precision. A week later, he called the leasing office. Said the radiator was buzzing. Demanded a new one. Threatened legal action. The receptionist forwarded me the voicemail. I played it on repeat. Not for the words. For the voice. That same grating tone. That entitlement. That venom coated in arrogance. But this time. He was speaking to me, he just didn't know it. I approved the repair. Sent a team. Let them do the job. Because I wanted everything to be perfect, on the surface. No excuses. No loopholes. Just enough rope. The next complaint came from a downstairs tenant. Said they'd seen him arguing with her in the hallway. Said it looked physical. We had cameras in the stairwell, silent, grainy footage. You couldn't hear anything. But you could see him, hands flailing, cornering her near the railing. Her, frozen, arms crossed, shrinking into herself. I watched that video over and over. And each time, I felt it rising. That old familiar burn. Not just anger. Rage. The next morning, I drafted a notice of lease violation. I didn't send it. Not yet. I saved it. Filed it. Prepared the paperwork. Because I knew what was coming next. A week later, he came to the office in person. Stormed in. Demanded to see who was in charge. I wasn't there. He slammed a hand on the desk. Said the unit was trash. Said he'd sue. The receptionist stayed calm. Took notes. Offered to escalate. When she told me about it, I asked for the footage. And when I saw his face, lips curled, eyes blazing, it was like looking at a photo from my childhood. Except now. I was the one holding the camera. The next day, I posted the notice. Violation of lease terms. Breach of conduct. Final warning. 72 hours to respond. 7 days to vacate upon repeated offense. It was dry. Professional. Unemotional. But for me? It was a letter to my past. And the return address was mine. She was the one who called. My mother. The woman who once told me to stop whining. Who said he was just trying to help me be a man. She called the leasing line. Said there had to be a mistake. That they'd been trying so hard. Said her boyfriend had a temper, but a good heart. I listened to the recording 3 times. Each word like a stone in my gut. She didn't know who she was talking to. But I knew. I remembered the way her voice used to sound when she read bedtime stories. How it sounded when she defended him to teachers, to friends, to me. It hadn't changed. She still chose him. Still protected him. Even now. I denied the appeal. Cited legal grounds. Attached the footage. The complaints. The clause. They had 7 days. 7 days to vacate. 7 days to realize that everything they thought they had was never theirs. They never came to the office again. No angry calls. No apology. No recognition. And that hurt more than I expected. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I still held on to a possibility, however faint, that she'd figure it out. That she'd see the name on the documents. That she'd put it together. That she'd whisper my name. But she never did. On the 6th day, I visited the unit. Knocked. Waited. She opened the door. Hair unwashed. Eyes dim. She didn't recognize me. Maintenance, she asked. I nodded once. She stepped aside. I walked in. Saw the boxes. The half-empty shelves. The man, him, sitting on the couch like a deflated king. He didn't look up. Didn't speak. I inspected the unit in silence. Then turned to her. There'll be a final inspection on day 7, I said. My voice didn't waver. She nodded. Okay. And I left. It was the last time I saw her. The last time she looked at me. Without knowing she was looking at her son. It started with a call. Not from her. From him. A voicemail, clipped and cold. Hey, This is Unit 2C. Water pressure's trash. I need someone out here today. Don't make me escalate. The tone was familiar. Too familiar. That old cadence. The kind he used when I was 10 and didn't wash dishes fast enough. Except this time. I wasn't the boy with the sponge. I was the man behind the system he was trying to threaten. I played the voicemail again. Not for the message. But for the music behind his words. The desperation. He didn't know the name he spoke to. Didn't know the voice on the lease paperwork belonged to the kid he used to shove, silence, belittle. All he knew was that something didn't work. And he wanted to make noise about it. I didn't respond. Not right away. I scheduled the maintenance for 48 hours later. Standard. Fair. No violations. But just slow enough to make him sweat. He called again the next day. Left another message, angrier this time. This is ridiculous. You people don't know how to run a building. I should have never moved into this dump. I let that one go unanswered too. Not because I was being petty. But because I knew what came next. Sure enough, 2 days later, the building supervisor called me. He's harassing tenants now, she said. Yelled at a woman doing laundry. Another report. Another camera angle. Another violation. The foundation was set. Now it was just about delivery. I pulled up their lease. Clause 3.6. Tenant agrees to maintain peaceful relations with other tenants. Harassment, threats, or hostile conduct will result in immediate notice. Clause 5.2. 3 documented incidents may result in expedited eviction proceedings. He had 5. I had waited long enough. I drafted the notice myself. Typed each word slowly. Deliberately. Notice to vacate, breach of lease agreement, final action. There was no anger in the language. No venom. Just law. Cold. Clean. Legal. But behind each line, was the quiet scream of a child who had never been heard. I printed it. Signed it. Stamped it. And then. I paused. Because once this was posted, it was real. There'd be no hiding behind paperwork anymore. He would be forced to leave. Not because I shouted. Not because I fought. But because I outlived him. Outworked him. Outbuilt him. The next morning, I went to the building early. Before the sun rose. I walked through the quiet hallways. Past sleeping tenants. Past locked doors. Until I reached 2C. Their door. The same one they walked through smiling. Now, a door that would close behind them for the last time. I stood in front of it. Held the notice in my hand. Breathed in. And knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still silence. So I taped the notice carefully to the center of the door, eye level. And walked away. I didn't linger. Didn't gloat. Didn't even look back. Because I didn't need to see his face. I had already seen enough. That afternoon, he called. Not to apologize. Not to beg. But to threaten. This is illegal. You'll regret this. I've got connections. Lawyers. I've done this before. I didn't respond. But I forwarded the voicemail to my legal team. Just for the file. 2 days passed. She called. Her voice, smaller than I remembered. Please. We don't have anywhere else. He's trying, I promise. He gets angry sometimes. Please. Give us one more chance. I didn't answer. Because it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her. The woman who let him stay. Who watched me break and did nothing. She chose him again. Even now. On the 6th day, I received notice they were preparing to vacate. They didn't fight it. Didn't go to court. Didn't even file an appeal. Because deep down, they knew. They always knew. You can only outrun the consequences for so long. Eventually, they find you. Even in a warm apartment. Even in a place that feels like a new start. Especially if that place is owned by the person you left behind. On the 7th day, I visited the unit. They were gone. No note. No thank you. No trace. Just empty walls. And on the counter, a key. Placed gently on top of a folded lease agreement. I picked it up. Turned it over in my hand. Then looked around the apartment. The same one I renovated. Painted. Cleaned. Made livable. And now, emptied by the people who once emptied me. I stood in the middle of that room for a long time. Not celebrating. Just breathing. Because I realized something. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them to say my name. I didn't need closure. What I needed, what I had built, was a boundary. A door they could no longer open. On the drive home, I didn't play music. Just silence. But not the kind I used to fear as a kid. This silence was different. It was peace. The kind you earn. Brick by brick. The office was quiet the day I printed the final copy. I'd written dozens of eviction notices over the years, typed them, signed them, posted them. But this one felt different. Because at the top of the document, printed neatly in bold black letters, was her full name. The woman who gave me life. The woman who turned away as someone else tried to break it. And for the first time, I wasn't just a landlord serving a legal notice. I was a son writing a final letter to his mother. I stared at her name for a long time. Remembering. Not the big things. The little ones. The way she used to hum when washing dishes. The way she'd check my forehead for fevers without a thermometer. The way she whispered, "You're my whole world," before turning off the light. That woman, whoever she had been, died a long time ago. Maybe she was killed by grief. Or by loneliness. Or by fear. But whoever remained after him was a stranger. I sealed the envelope and placed it on my desk. I didn't send it. Not yet. Because part of me still believed she'd figure it out. That she'd look at the lease. See the signature. Read the management company's name. And remember. But she never did. They left without saying a word. No knock on my door. No phone call. No apology. Not even a moment of acknowledgement. They left as they arrived. Together, loud in silence. I opened the unit the day after they moved out. It was clean. Mostly. A few scuff marks. A missing light bulb. One cracked tile. Nothing I couldn't fix. But in the corner of the bedroom, near the closet, I found something I wasn't expecting. A shoebox. Inside it, old receipts. Utility bills. An empty pill bottle. And a photograph. Of me. I was maybe 9 in the photo. Smiling with missing front teeth. Holding a paper airplane. She was next to me. Her arms around my shoulders. Her eyes soft. Her smile real. I sat on the floor and stared at that photo for a long time. Long enough to remember what it felt like to be held. I didn't cry. I don't know why. Maybe I had nothing left. Maybe revenge dries up the wells we used to draw love from. That night, I went home and made tea. Turned on no lights. sat in silence. And I thought about what I had done. What I had become. Not a villain. Not a hero. Just, a man. A man who had rewritten the story he was given. People ask if I forgave her. I don't answer. Because forgiveness isn't something you post about or print in bold. It's something you live. I never told anyone the full story. Not even Grace. Not the friends I eventually let in. Not the therapist I only saw once and never called back. But I did write it down. Page after page. Not for the world. Not for closure. But to remind myself. It happened. I survived. And I made it mean something. Sometimes I pass that building. The one they lived in. Sometimes I walk up to the second floor, open the door to Unit 2C, and stand in the middle of the room. The walls remember them. But the air is mine. I fill the space with presence. With breath. With ownership. And then I lock the door behind me. I don't celebrate what I did. But I don't regret it either. Because justice doesn't always come in the form of courtroom verdicts or tearful reunions. Sometimes it comes as a form. A signature. A notice taped to a door. And maybe, someday, she'll look back. Maybe she'll realize who owned the roof she slept under. Who turned the key on her second chance. Who gave her a home before taking it away. Maybe she'll remember that boy. The one she once said was too soft. The one who became strong enough to evict a monster. And still silent enough to let her walk away without shame. The eviction notice was addressed to Ms. L. Martinez. But I wrote one copy just for myself. I never mailed it. I keep it in my drawer. It starts with her name. And ends with mine.